I wanted to kind of start off by asking you about third places or third spaces, because when I researched into the Clifton Hill Community Centre, it seems to read as a sort of third place in that sense.
Yeah, well, third place being a sort of like an alternative space to our
To work and to your house, basically.
that's right, yeah, the third space. It was a third space in terms of in a big way, because there was back in the sort of late 70s that the mainstream was so big. I mean, there was only really a mainstream. There weren't all these little subcultures that there are now. And even anything alternative back then was kind of already understood by everybody or kind of known about. And I think Clifton Hill was interesting because it came in and no one really knew it was happening except a very select group of people to start with. And we felt very much it was a space outside of the mainstream in terms of like popular music, jazz, and maybe academic music. It just seemed like another space. So it probably is a good way to phrase it, yeah.
Yeah, like definitely Clifton Hill to this day, I feel has a magical kind of energy to it. I've had lots of interesting things happen to me in Clifton Hill
All right, okay.
before knowing about the community center. Is there anything like that today at the moment?
Well, there are places, there's loads of places in a way, because I think a whole lot of spaces opened up in the sort of years that followed. I mean, not for another like maybe, 10, 15 years. I mean, started with, it depends where you're coming from, but if you understand the music scene and alternative music making, there'd be places like, obviously the Make It Up Club is
Yeah.
the kind of the close continuation, even though the Make It Up Club has a completely different aesthetic because it is about often making it up on the spot, or that was its original kind of idea. So people would go there and kind of improvise without any plan. Although, of course, they'd bring what they'd learned and what they know to that. But at Clifton Hill, people always came with a plan. They always came with a score or a set of instructions or something they knew they were going to do. Even if they didn't know what the outcomes might be, they knew what the process would be. And so that was that era. And then things became a lot more like today in music making, where certain kinds of music making where people get together and open their laptops or get a little funky device and start making sounds and sort of work quite spontaneously. And they're not necessarily pursuing a concept. They're just sort of realizing things as they go. Whereas I think Clifton Hill was very much concept driven.
That's awesome. I saw you post about Peter Tyndall's Slave Guitars. He, like a few weeks ago, he performed that again.
He performed that at Clifton Hill. He hasn't performed it since. And so I put together a website whilst I was at RMIT as a research fellow. I developed a website which had a whole lot of recordings on it that were made at Clifton Hill. And Peter's is one of those pieces, Peter's piece. And that website is called www.listeningtothearchive.com. And listening to the archive is one word. And on that, you'll get about 50 recordings that were made during that time. And you can hear how the music, it sounds very fresh today. It's like it was recorded very recently, but also, some interesting differences.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was very struck by the way the poster for the Slave Guitars looked. I'm still having trouble understanding exactly what it's about, but the imagery, of it just kind of stays in my head. I think the custom guitar that he made for it with like
he made a custom guitar in the shape of a kind of an artwork that's hanging, and so the the kind of key area where you tune your guitar is where you hang the painting, and the actual body of the guitar is probably the painting itself. So everything that he does is kind of based around the idea of a painting hanging on a wall. And so this was a kind of an indulgent sort of aspect that that took him into the realm of music. And he performed these two kind of long minimalist sort of guitar pieces that used a lot of loopings and cassette loopings and things like that.
Right. And what was the reception to, say, his performance now versus maybe what it would have been back then?
Well, he hasn't performed it since then, so this is the thing. So in a way, it remains a kind of a mythical performance, which he did do several times, and at Clifton Hill. Well, I don't know how many times he did it. Maybe not those many, but it remains kind of a sonic statement. And he released a cassette, Slave Guitars cassette, that you used to be able to purchase, but he hasn't kind of revisited that.
Yeah. I was just thinking about it in terms of, because you had lots of different musicians from that era also play, right? It wasn't just his work.
So you're talking about the we called it New Music.
I think so. Yeah.
Concert that was last weekend after before last. So that was a series of performances, of people who performed at Clifton Hill, because they're all. I was very young at Clifton Hill. I was like 20, but like there's people who are like 30, and they're now pretty old. And so it felt like, because I'd done the website, it was time to try and turn that into a concert, and everyone was keen to do something. So we got quite a few performers from that era, like Ros Bant, Raina Lintz, Ron McCook, Warren Burt, Ernie Althoff. Then there's groups like Essendon Airport, which is the group, my group, and a group called Tisk Tisk Tisk, or the Three Arrows. We re-performed one of their sets, and we mixed that in with contemporary musicians who are doing stuff that's also kind of agitating people in like not in a particular scene as such, but kind of these groups like Who Cares and Bodies of Eternal. I don't know. I forget the full title now. Anyway, Bodies, and also a couple of other artists who are very interesting as well, who are very, very young and doing things now. So we kind of mixed it up to show what people were doing then, but also what people are doing now, who have been informed by what was happening back then, I guess.
Right. And in terms of your album 50 Synthesizers Greats, would somebody making that kind of music have an easier time getting it played on the radio now than back when you put that album out?
Well, actually, I got it on the radio pretty easily then. I have to say, I'd probably be harder now to get played.
Yeah,
because there's for a number of reasons. One is there's so much really great material around. The 50 Synthesizer Greats was actually pretty badly played. I mean, it's very sort of endearing kind of music, but it was it had an aesthetic that was about how its competency, how well it was played, as much as what the sounds like, or how musical it is. But there were only a handful of radio stations, and they were very prominent back then. Like there was Triple R, but then it was called 3RMIT, and then it became Triple R, and there was Double J, and maybe PBS was going, and they were keen for alternative things, and so my album 50 Synthesizer Greats was one of the sort of earliest sort of homemade, self-made sort of Australian records. I didn't make it to be a record. It's just that I was people convinced me to put it out, warts and all. And then it got played and it charted. It charted along with, I remember it was David Bowie and a whole bunch of kind of like real
That's awesome.
legitimate music as well, and I was slotted in there as well. And they gave it airplay, whereas now they gave it airplay because of its novelty and because it was a kind of a young sort of slightly post-punky sort of had that sort of attitude of abandonment and provocation, whereas now I think there's so much around. Yeah, you'd have to have other qualities to punch through.
For sure. And who were you drawing from musically, like as inspirations during that time for that album?
So I mainly listened to, I had very eclectic taste, but I'm not sort of a major listener to, various styles of music. I was like into mainstream pop music, just like most people. And so there was that, but also a lot of underground, so-called underground music that was maybe released on things like Virgin Records and, anything from, I don't know, it's King Crimson, Hatfield in the North, and but then also minimalism was very important then too. And so I was also doing a course at La Trobe University, which just started up, and a teacher, Warren Burt, who ended up, I put him on last week as a performer, but he brought all these minimalist ideas from America. And so we learned about very early Philip Glass and Steve Reich and Terry Riley and others. And we adopted a lot of those ideas. And so some of that went into it as well. But the whole thing, for 50 synthesizer greats, it was really just a bit of a cynical piss take of genres and styles that were just, which I just sort of mimicked and poked the eyes out of in a very dismissive way. And so you'll find that a lot of them, 50 synthesizer greats, have particular flavors, whether they're bluesy or sci-fi, or krautrocky, but they'll fall apart and they won't be as complete and they'll be a bit messy. So it was done like very much with a kind of a dismissive attitude, I suppose, but also a sense of humor, because it was all kind of hilarious,
Yeah. No, I saw the video today of you playing at Multisonics, like playing a few pieces from it.
Oh, that little video, right.
Yeah, and it's a great video, and it's very cool and meta that you were playing to yourself, revisiting these songs in front of that mirror.
Yeah, and I've done that live now a few times, taken that 50 synthesizer greats as a kind of a newer work, which I kind of redo. It's been really good recently.
That's awesome. I saw you played Jerkfest, and you played Drive.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's pretty wild. I mean, are you aware how much your sound, especially with Essendon Airport, like would have inspired at least 30% to 70, maybe the whole lineup?
Not aware at all, really. I mean, people do come up and do say, they know Essendon Airport, and it's very much, on people's lips that I talk to. But there's never, it's not so overtly kind of known for us, because we're Essendon Airport. We're all we live in a slightly world that's slightly removed. I'm probably the most involved in sound and music, and then Robert Goodge, the guitarist, is. Well, they are, but in different ways. They're slightly more in their own scenes. And so the vast sort of, 20 to 30-year-old group who might be influenced, it's great that we get in touch with they get in touch with us.
Yeah.
And drag us along to their gigs. So that's quite nice.
Is that how Jerkfest came about? How
did Jerkfest happen? So Essendon Airport played the year before, and we that would have been we released during COVID. We made a single, and I think that may have and that was released on Chapter Music, and I think that may have just got us an invite there because people knew. We started performing again, and I think maybe, Ben and Guy, who run Chapter, talk to people, though they're not our agents necessarily, but something, they knew we were around, and so we were happy to put a set together for them, and we played also at Brunswick Ballroom that particular set as well. Yeah.
Cool. And then you also played Meredith last year, right? At the end of last year.
Yeah, was it last year? Yeah, in December. That was like the Sunday morning, the much coveted Sunday morning spot. That's when everyone's still asleep.
Oh, really? Oh.
So, I mean, we did have some people there. It was kind of cute and it was kind of lovely. But it's interesting little spot. But that was actually really, really fabulous. It was very nice that we were appreciated by the early risers.
And do you find that, like, when you're playing that set, for example, or any set since, that you're incorporating newer technologies into your performances, or do you try to stay true to the original sound?
Yeah, that's interesting because we actually try and stay true. So we play the original instruments. I mean, I got a laptop, but it's only playing what I used to play on a reel-to-reel tape machine. But everything else is sort of legitimate, even though the Wurlitzer with its case, its flight case is so heavy. I'm actually thinking I might have to upgrade to something slicker. But no, there's something about those old instruments. There's the kind of a sense that the instruments and the players were all analog. We're all kind of that era before digital. So we make the music the same way that we did then.
Yeah, I mean, I collect synths as well for my band and for my own use for like scoring, but I'd never even heard of the Korg 700, which I think is what you used for 50 synth grades. I didn't even know that was a real thing.
Well, it's I'll show it to you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, wow.
This is it here. It's just a little mono synth.
Cool.
And it was the bass for the Essendon Airplane palimpsest thing. So it's just a whole lot of little presets and a traveler filter sliders there, and then a bunch of presets. And you can't store any memory. You just have to remember write down the presets. And it was made in the sort of mid-70s to sit on top of a home organ to sort of add extra color. And but it's actually got a fabulous bass sound. So it's really great for bass on Essendon Airport palimpsest record. But yeah, like you say, that was solely what I used for 50 synthesizer greats.
Cool, yeah. No, I'm such a big fan of synthesizers. I was recently in they opened up a new museum, like synthesizer museum in Berlin, which blew my mind completely, which I highly recommend. I think it's literally just called the Berlin Synth Museum.
Right. Well, you do know Mess here.
We do have Mess here, and for some reason, I've studied at Collarts as well, at music production, but I still haven't gone to Mess.
Right.
I think I'm too intimidated, too scared. I'll just be there all day.
Well, you can. I was there today, actually.
Really?
So you can go down and just like Wednesday to Friday and just knock on the door and say you want to have a look, and they'll let you in. They're very friendly people.
Really? Do they also allow you to just bring like a USB and record into it?
Well, you have to sign up for all that stuff.
Yeah.
So you can go for a look, and then you have to. Then you can pay to do a session, which is like 3 hours or maybe 4 hours, which is a long time. You sort of to do something, and you can bring a USB stick then, and save to that or a Zoom or something. So you can take anything you want and record, anything.
Cool.
And then I think it's cheaper if you become a member, and then you can book synths and decide which ones you want to, you can book a synth, and so no one else will have it when you're there and all that sort of stuff. And there's experts on hand who will show you how to use stuff.
Oh yeah, we're recording an album that started off live, but now it's all on my laptop on Ableton. So maybe I should just go there and just get my money's worth. That'd be amazing, actually.
Well, you could, you could put, the most amazing bunch of synths and drum machines and effects units and just old keyboards as well as Eurorack stuff. There's a ton of stuff. Yeah.
I'm curious, your focus on sound research, which I want to go into in a bit. I guess, has that always been a part of, like, I guess, your music journey, or did that come later? Because obviously you have the conceptual side of things with, even with 50 synthesizer greats, like, I guess, like a conceptual side of, I guess, like pre-planning maybe going into it, but
Well, yeah, I tend to think there's always, for me, there always seems to be a reason behind doing something, or in order to do something, there has to be a reason or something. It's like, even if it's just a problem to work out how to get something out of that synth that's useful, but it can be looking at sort of concepts and different sort of structures. I like structures and forms and bringing those to bear on something rather than just making stuff up out of thin air, which is not to say I don't do that as well. So it's a mix of things, but I always like to think music can always conveys stuff that's musical, but then there's other ways to read that music. You can or hear it and understand it. You can, I mean, it's 50 synthesizer greats is very ironic and cynical, but then some people can hear it as not of those things and hear it as just pure music and just think it's badly played, music. But if they know there's an attitude behind it and the position, then it gives extra sort of layers of meaning. Even the sound of technologies and the history of the sound of, the history of technological sound can be layered up and orchestrated in interesting ways as well. Yeah, I like to have themes. I mean, the one, a second album I did a long time ago was called Layer on Layer, and that was about layering up sounds, which is what you did in a recording studio, and then the whole sort of lyric behind all the songs, which is where that song you like comes from, the bits that move together.
yeah.
You mentioned it all comes from that, and so that the album was about how a song is made. What is a song, and how does it affect you? And that's why that song is called "The Bits That Move Together," and then the lyrics play with that a little bit, and are just very self-reflective, because I just enjoy finding myself in a situation of making the music and then sort of reflecting on that process as I'm making it. And so it becomes like, in theatre, it's like breaking the fourth wall when you stare back at the audience and go, I know that I'm actually performing this to you, and
Yeah.
it just has more flavors to it. For me, it's just kind of more interesting.
It's interesting as well, like when you were saying that the tone on the first album was cynical, and that, I guess, in your words, you said badly played. But like, even the way that we perceive that album now, like, people have become a lot more probably open-minded in regards to noise rock and sound, right? Like, there's a lot of young people who will listen to any kind of sound music. And so even like, I was listening to it today for the first time, and all I thought was, wow, this is like a really interesting piece of like open, like, synth music, like it didn't even occur to me that, that it was badly played or anything like that, which is interesting to think about how a younger generation would respond to your material now as well, right?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, when I say it's badly played, it wasn't intentionally badly played. It's just
No,
that. So, because I was only mucking around it, I wasn't trying to do an album until I was convinced to put it out. So I was just I made 50 pieces, and then 37 or 38 on the CD got released, and the rest just wouldn't fit on. And so I was able to cull the ones that didn't work that well. But when I was making, I was trying my best to do it right. But then I would have occasional mistakes. But because I was just working stuff out and there was no audience, because it wasn't making a record, I just let that go, because I wanted to do the next layer and the next layer just to see what it would become. Because you record, again, layer on layer, a track at a time with 50 synthesizer greats. And once you've committed one line, you then have to put another line over the top, and you can't alter the previous line. So you just have to, a piece takes shape as you go. So I think people enjoy now, back then, it was important to play everything like really well. But then it became an aesthetic more recently, where things not being played, being played as well as one can, but it having mistakes and it not quite getting there has a quality about it which is quite endearing. It's sort of like we want, yes, it's almost there, and people enjoy the mistakes because they know the intention is to make it work. So I think that's
human.
become more understandable now.
Yeah, it's very human, especially with electronic music. And granted, you are playing analog synths, but in a world that's getting increasingly AI and robotic and cold, those little mistakes on records just feel so. Those little idiosyncratic moments, they feel so real and
Yeah.
honest. Because even a body of work that's quite complicated, one little fuck up can undermine the entire piece, but it can also just tell people that you're human too, and that a human created this record.
Yeah, I think so. I think so things, it's like, when things played too perfectly, it sort of loses certain qualities. It's like how analog equipment, tried to get as good as it can, and analog equipment, like stuff in a recording studio, used to be very, very expensive, thousands of dollars for a unit, and they get the noise floor down and make it as brilliant and pristine as possible. And then we flipped over into the digital world, and then people went, well, actually, we want the noises of the bad reverb and the Porter Studio, and we want that because it has all these other qualities. And so people suddenly realized that all that sort of noise and dirt was an essential part, and there's no sort of pristine end place. It's all the other sort of colors of the sound of making the work that are interesting as well.
And wasn't it also like the 909 when it got introduced was supposed to replace drummers, and then that didn't work because it sounded nothing like a real drum set. But then the 909, or I think it was
808.
It must have been the 808. One of them like ended up, creating house music. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. Volume. I mean, yeah, incredible. The whole sort of Roland and 808, the 909 for sure, and 606 or whatever it is. They were all, those qualities. Instead of trying to mimic the drums, acoustic drums, I guess people realized that since most things are amplified and come through a loudspeaker anyway, that an acoustic drum or a filtered white noise of an 808, they both excite a loudspeaker. And so those drum machines became legitimate instead of being like, they sounded as legitimate on their own terms as a drum kit.
Yeah, for sure. And also just going back to what you were saying about layer on layer and how you would make I guess you couldn't go back and change what you'd previously done. It does remind me of something I've always done because I don't pencil with my artworks. I always go straight to pen. So if I make a mistake, that's it,
Same deal, yeah.
And it's the classic Pablo Picasso had a quote about like how making art is walking on a tightrope, And when you set out to make the piece, it's life or death in a way. So like now, obviously you can like put your stuff into Adobe and maybe like fix up a few, like mistakes or whatever. But it is cool. I guess I kind of hold that theory, even though I can just go back and delete something. I try to make sure that when I'm going in, it's as good as it can be, to capture that essence, to capture the sound of that time. Because you can always go back and make things better, but it doesn't always sound better, It might lack emotion if it's a vocal delivery or, a certain kind of warmth or timbre of a room.
Well, I guess you always have to be in the right place to create music or art, whatever. And so to do it formulaically or in front of a computer screen can be, the last place you want to be because it goes against all of that stuff. And
sure.
I've done a new album, hasn't been released or whatever, but it's actually I had to find ways to write music where I wasn't just writing it on the screen, and I had to find ways of creating accidents and different kinds of accidents, and then bringing the accidents together and layering them, and just so there was some organic process still, and that's still something to discover rather than making the right decisions along the way. You want to actually try and fix a mistake or this and then try and make things work. And then all of a sudden you find a solution and everything gels. And that's, luckily I was able to use that method recently. And it got me out of the fact that, I got, so much sort of technology and, digital workstations at core.
Yeah.
It goes against music making a lot of the time for me.
No, it very much is like a puzzle piece, but every puzzle is different, and every song is different and requires a different solution. And I've noticed it now, like for me, I was in a band and we were always doing, traditional structures and traditional songs until I basically got burnt out to the point where it made me sick to play music because we were doing it to try to get on the radio, but we were doing it to try to be accessible to people.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah, well, it can be good, but if
you got to
do it quickly and
very quickly, and I guess you have to have a level of success that that reflects what you're doing. And it didn't work for me or who I am. And so for my kind of breakthrough like moment mentally was listening to Captain Beefheart and just realizing that a song can just kind of do whatever it wants and just zigzag around. And ever since then, I've written like the best work that I've ever done. And because no song is identical in structure, you can kind of specifically adhere to certain sections and give them more love and more, time than you would if it was just a traditional song where you kind of focus on other aspects, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah.
But also like in terms of having technology, I also find myself like super overwhelmed if I have, a lot of instruments around me. When I was in Berlin and the Netherlands, I didn't even have a synthesizer, and I was tasked with writing 3 songs for my album, and I had to finish them before I came home. So I just had to use my laptop, just the keys on my laptop. I ended up writing some of the best stuff I've ever done because I was completely limited. There was nowhere to go.
No, limiting's really limiting your resources is a really good thing. And I was like, as I'll say, I was at MESS today, Melbourne Electronic Sound Studios, and I've been there a few times, but not for a while, and then just coming back in and just seeing how many different options there are, how many different synths, and like each one of them, you could make a total masterwork out of every one of the pieces there. And it's like, where do I even begin? It's just, and how can I persist with something if I'm not getting anywhere? I can just put that back on the shelf and grab something else. But that's not the way to do it. You've got to actually find a way to make something work for you. And so it's, I think having limits, I'm doing a commission for the MESS I think it's for their Sonorous series in July. And so I'd wish they'd have just said, you can only work on this synthesizer, you mustn't touch anything else. And then it would have, narrowed things down. But I can do that for myself, I guess. I just got to choose which, just got to make that choice.
Well, each new project needs its own set of rules that you impose. Yeah. And I think that can make such an exciting, even if the rules are completely outrageous. Like if you said to a band, you can only eat this type of food while in the studio. Yeah. As long as that's on the board, it's on the board. It has to be respected.
Well, that's the thing of, using concepts, you have a concept and then it's got to adhere to that concept or, which is basically rules and, or an algorithm, that you put in place. It can only do that. It can't, go elsewhere. So I'm going to have to find one. I'm going to have to, because it's completely open-ended. It's unusual. I normally have to, there's a reason behind a commission. So this one's thrown me a bit because it's like, I can do whatever I want. So
no, focus is what we need to do at the end of the day, right? For any project. Focus, and that's why bands are so hard because you have to get multiple people to focus. And that's very, very difficult, I've found.
This potty is sponsored by Thin Slizzy, serving Collingwood and surrounding suburbs the tastiest pizzas since 2020. Head over to thinslizzy.com to see for yourself. Now let's get on with the show.
I wanted to ask you about We Are Printers 2. I have it here as a speculative and archaeological video set in the former Age newspaper building. So to start off with, is that the Age newspaper building in near Port Melbourne? Is that the one that...
It's one that used to be in Spencer Street.
Spencer Street. Oh, so it's the one that used to be in, near Southern Cross. I know.
Exactly. It was across the road from Southern Cross.
Gotcha.
Just a bit further up, and it was a big brutalist building.
Yeah, I remember. I know exactly the one. Yeah.
And it's a piece. So that work, We Are Printers Too, was made with my partner Sonia Lieber, and so we make a lot of videos, and that's what I've been doing the last 15 years, as well as music, but making sort of art videos. And I kind of walked in there because I knew they closed down and they moved out the Age people, and they were decommissioning the building, and I kind of jumped. I could see in the building that everything was still in there in a way, like some of the structures were there and furniture was still there, and so I kind of went walking in there, and then I got sort of caught by security, and they wondered what I was doing. So I explained myself, and it seemed like a superannuation company had bought the building and they were going to redevelop it. And I said that I'd really love to make Sonia and I would really love to make an artwork in there. And we, cutting a long story short, we applied to the superannuation fund, and they kept the building open for, I think it was 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, with all the lights on and everything functioning, because it's you have to keep buildings alive.
Yeah.
And we went and filmed with musicians in there, with percussionists actually, and percussion being an early form of printing in a way, where you're kind of saying things beyond the body using tools. And we made this artwork, which you probably haven't seen it.
I watched it. I watched the video. Yeah.
Okay, so you've seen it online, like some of it online, not all of it.
I watched I think 8 minutes of it. I don't know how long the full video.
Yeah. Well, it's about 13 minutes or something online. I don't think it's available, but maybe it is. You may anyway. Good. It's so that's interesting way of using sound for us. It gave us a good way to draw out certain ideas. And the Age building, the thing about it, it was a printing press, but also all the journalists worked in that building too. So everything happened. The Age produced, news came in from all the different places, and it was funneled through one newspaper, The Age, and all the powers came together to invent news, make news, and then advertising, and then print it, and it flew out on trucks, and reviews of shows and bands, and there used to be lots of reviewers used to be a thing, for music and plays and artworks, lots of reviews, and we captured that work, and it's good. I mean, the NGV have that work, and they show it from time to time. So it's happy.
Yeah, no, I think I was lying on the grass with my bass player, maybe 5 months ago, and I saw that it was on sale again. That building, so it had been sold. I don't know who bought it now. I was like, man, if I had money, I would.
The building itself has been demolished. So
it's been demolished.
Yeah,
it would be a different one then.
No, it'd be a different building. They would have built because they were going to build 5 buildings in place of it, because it's been demolished. Because I filmed it being demolished. Actually.
Oh, really? So you were there. You can guarantee that place is no longer.
You could see the building. Bulldozers, they're knocking it down. Yeah.
There is an interesting thing to be said about, so that was The Age. I'm pretty sure I went to a rave I was there for 2 seconds, but I drove someone to a rave near mine in Port Melbourne at the abandoned Herald Sun building. Also, like a giant, from what I saw at the time, was a gigantic, colossal, it was decrepit at the time, but it was still standing. And it is interesting. These spaces have a certain kind of energy and certain feel.
Yeah.
But you used it for your conceptual practice, for your art practice.
Yeah, well, in this case, you could see all the presses were still there, and so you could, and we had, as I say, percussionists wandering around doing various tasks and playing bits of the infrastructure, and just seeing these incredible forces that came to bear, to make the news that became like our information, and just what a sort of mechanical process that was, and using percussion also because it used to be a very noisy place, but when we filmed, it was dead quiet. But because we brought percussionists in, they kind of brought back some of the sound of the chatter of the making of language, or the making of printed words has all this byproduct, which is nice.
For sure. I just really enjoyed watching the video and seeing all these different musicians from like different fields just coming together, just to make this art. I thought it was really cool and really inspiring as well.
Oh, great. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, because when I was looking at your art pieces, some of them, like, obviously they say like 2019, that was when it happened, or 2018 or whatever, but some of them say ongoing, and I was like, ongoing? I was like, how can this be? And then looking at the 5,000 calls and actually proximities, that's like a permanent sound exhibition that's on a bridge in Melbourne, right? At the William
Barrack Bridge, yeah.
And it's still there.
It's still going. So, I mean, these things, it says ongoing. I mean, obviously, it will stop at some point. I mean, we're not, claiming to keep a work there. But they actually, on the William Barrack Bridge, that was done for the Commonwealth Games in 2006, 6 and 7. And we created an artwork for the bridge, which has the sounds of Australians who've migrated from all the different Commonwealth countries. And so they end up, we recorded them singing songs from their mother country, or songs they were taught, or songs they remember. So they're sort of Australian, sort of reflecting on their sort of entangled past. And in the centre of the bridge, we have the Wurundjeri community, and they're relearning a song that was written for them, where Joy Wanda Murphy, the elder, Wurundjeri elder, is teaching her family this song. It's at the top of the bridge. So that work, it's visually falling apart. It needs to be repaired, and it's funny. Like at the count, no one actually, the actual railway infrastructure people own the bridge, and they've cuffed up, and we've totally refurbished the sound and put a whole new computer delivery system in, because it's all very randomized, 24-channel sort of file delivery system. So we've got new speakers, new computer and everything, which was fantastic. And the next task is to maybe fix up the visual part of it, but that would be very expensive, and I don't know if that's ever going to happen. So it might end up just visually falling apart, but the sounds are still going. It's kind of, we'll see what happens.
But like, in terms of the visual part of it, what does it look like per se?
So it's got a kind of like a tattoo-y mark along both sides of there are these sort of like balustrades which stop you falling over into the railway lines, because the bridge is a pedestrian bridge towards the MCG from Birrarung Ma Park, and you walk over or you cycle over, and on the sides there are these twists and twirls which are kind of indicative of embellishments. Really, the idea that was developed by another artist, Simeon Nelson, who we worked with, who's an Australian artist based in London these days. So he did a whole lot of ornamentation that was really similar to the ornamentation of the voice. So we just wanted like something that represented the twists and turns and embellishments of vocalizations, and so that's what those images are. We've wanted to try and redevelop the bridge with more sort of indigenous content, and reflecting not so much the Commonwealth anymore, because it's a bit on the nose, like reflecting sort of more permanent Australian cultures, but that's like an ongoing thing to try and do that. So that's an aim. Yeah.
It's pretty awesome though that like you do have these different works in different places that are just ongoing, and like millions, I mean, you could probably say millions of people, probably maybe, I don't know if more or less, but definitely hundreds of thousands of people have walked through these structures not even knowing, what your contribution was, and subconsciously they're getting this art, whether they want to or not. I probably went through that bridge, as well.
Yeah, you do. I like that. Yeah, you got to make a work that people. I like works being, as I say, conceptual, provocative, and kind of suggesting things. But if you're working in the public, you've got to be very careful about that, because if you're very provocative, then sure, the work will be fantastic, but it'll only be up for a few days because there'll be enough forces out there to say you can't do that.
I mean, it's funny you say that. Obviously, this isn't an artist that I would say is the next great thing, but obviously you would have heard of the bird, Pam the Bird artwork that kept appearing everywhere. It appeared on all the hotel chains and all that. And that's a good example of something that, since they caught him, I think they spent millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands taking off every single one of them. But there's still some of them that are in just like inconvenient places for people, But,
yeah, look, that was an amazing gesture. I mean, sometimes, it's, when tagging becomes kind of like more interestingly artistic, and that, some of them can really resonate in a nice and interesting way. And that did, they were quite humorous. And as you say, there's still a few of them, those up. But artwork, sonic works in particular, because we worked as in sort of museums, sort of history museums and Melbourne Museum doing things, and we know that you got to have sound that if it's going to be suggestive of something, it's got to do it quietly, and so that if someone hears it 20 times, they might pick up on something.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But they won't hear it the first time. Otherwise, it just becomes that's the only thing they hear, and they'll get irritated, or it's very you got to be a little bit careful.
For sure. Like, you got to make sure that if you are going to be provocative, that it's almost like a subliminal thing, right?
And also to use voices. A lot of our soundscapes use language, and they use sort of human voice, and but it's normally everyday human voice. It's not actors and performers, because that puts people off as well. But if they're just hearing voices which could actually be on the bridge, then they're not going to worry so much, because it's sort of like if you don't make it threatening, then they'll sort of go, it's a voice like my voice, It's that they'll say it's an everyday voice. It's not some pretentious kind of overlay.
That's so fascinating, because I guess you're right. If you were on the bridge and it was like a Shakespearean accent, you would be like, what the fuck is that? That's not...
Yeah, you'd sort of, you might put up with, like 10% of the public might find that quite interesting and amusing.
I would, yeah.
The rest would just like, no. They would be kicking in the speakers, basically.
That's awesome. And again, that was the intention. Cool, right? But that's obviously...
Yeah, exactly. But it's expensive sort of exercise.
Expensive, yeah. That's so cool. Because I guess the longevity of these works is just like amazing to me. Like, I don't know many pieces that are still around for that long. You know what I mean? I guess like artworks, but a sonic thing, that's cool.
I think look, to be honest, that's the only one I think that is still running now, the one on the William Barrack Bridge. The Sydney one stopped by its own volition, where the speakers basically gave out. And so that got refurbished as well. It lasted 15 odd years. So
yeah,
it's supposed to, you're actually commissioned for 10. It's got to run for 10. And so the Sydney one went for 15, 16 years. And I visited, when I last visited there, and it was still working, these Bose speakers were so wrecked by rain, wind, sun, that they'd fallen apart, and you'd see the speaker cone, and even half the speaker cone was missing, and it was still putting out a sound. It was still trying to do, it was like hilarious. They were like these little animals still trying to speak. And we've prepared the speakers. They were specially made for the outdoors, and then they were coated with extra stuff. And so they really lasted. But, but that one outstayed its welcome, because it never really, it survived a long time after 9/11, but things became a lot more scary after 9/11, and there's a lot more surveillance out there and people listening for people agitating. And so sonic works are a little more tricky, because people are very much aware. They've got to know it's a friendly place. And the one in Sydney, 5,000 calls around the Olympic Stadium, it was the sound of human effort. with all sorts of effort, including pain, pleasure, stressing, straining. And so some of those sounds were very ambiguous and sounded a little bit threatening to some people.
Wow. Yeah, you never think about, like, I guess it's getting into like paranoid territory, but like people listening in, or like what that even sounds like. I don't even know. Obviously you have surveillance, but I've never really thought about whether people are listening to you when you're outside, or whether a sound work could interfere with someone's perception of a place,
It's more like someone will report to security that somebody's calling
out. Places, yeah.
Threatening,
sure.
There's a threatening voice over there. And it might not be threatening. It might be someone kind of playing sport, calling out. But it's like, so we had to turn it down, even though there's a lot of music in it as well. And people who are patrolling, security people, if they hear voices, they can get a little bit concerned. Like Olympic Stadium was, massive, and so there are more nooks and crannies. Whereas on a bridge, you pretty well know you're okay,
No, like it's true as well in like park settings. Like I remember in the Netherlands, I just got off my train. I was about to eat my sandwich, and I heard a scream, like the loudest scream ever. And then everybody just turns to this one point in the park, and then we watch the guy get tased. Like in front of us.
Yeah. I mean, the world has changed from those commissions for those sound works. The last commission for that was 2006. A lot's happened that's 20 years ago. That's that's a long time in this world. And so now it's a scarier, people are a lot more paranoid now. People are growing up much more paranoid than they were, and sounds are threatening. And there are people who are off their meds more and are more kind of disruptive and more violence. And so I think we had like a window when those kind of soundscapes really worked, and I think we might have moved on from that era.
Yeah, it's definitely maybe a harsher time. I mean, I'm 29, so I would have only been 9 years old when that I think. But I do remember certain things being more, I don't know if innocent is the word, but playful, they're more
innocent. I mean, things were so innocent even 20 years ago, like.
Yeah.
And now, just because, social media and our devices have kind of throw things, throw every kind of bit of grief at us, and we have to kind of, see things and read about things that, weren't so available to us, because the big newspapers used to decide what we saw, we didn't have people just posting stuff up. And
no, we're definitely more exposed to pretty much everything at any point in time. So we're a lot more, I think younger generations are a lot more jaded in that regard as well, but also a lot more sensitive too, because of just overstimulation we're getting.
The younger people are, so much different. They're grown up in such a different world to the world I grew up in. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's definitely. I mean, so much of what I love came from the 70s and even the early 2000s as well, musically as well. And I think that there might have been a bit more hope in those times than there is at the moment. Even the fact that we have so much available and genres are still very relevant to radio, and top 40s and stuff, but they're not as relevant to your average listener. But it's just like too much. Like there's just too much going on. It's very hard to focus and actually,
there's so much, you got, I mean, us discovering music back when I was, just a teenager or whatever, but you'd have to go into the city and go to the 2 or 3 interesting music stores, Curio and Fine Music, Thomas's, to actually find some stuff that was cheap enough on the remainder bin that was really interesting because no one else wanted it because they didn't know what it was. And you'd find really great, 1 or 2 really precious things. But then you'd have to wait for a newspaper like New Music Express to come from the UK and read about the music. That took 6 weeks to come. And you wouldn't, whereas my daughter found out, learnt in the space of 12 months, basically had the 70s and 80s down pat when she was like 15, because she worked it all out because it's all on the internet. Because there's There's never any what you couldn't source. Now you got everything, which is. And back then there was very little, which is why people like me and a few others, we stumbled across the opportunities to make something for this audience that was hungry for stuff. And there were so few of us making things. It wasn't like now there's every second person is a musician, so.
Yeah. I mean, I was because I work at different like radio stations and stuff, and I volunteer around. And it's interesting looking at the catalog of music and what is like perceived by a place to be like the scene, right? And everyone has their own interpretations of the scene depending on where you're placed. But it is interesting seeing all the bands, especially looking at all the post-punk bands and all the, I guess like the quote unquote innovators, and thinking, well, what, like for me now as a 29-year-old who wants to be creative, I'm thinking, what can I do that these bands don't do? What is the service that they aren't providing? And you obviously have to go to their shows too, and you kind of have to get to know them, because that's also part of the appeal of an audience member with these bands. It's an intimate connection. But once you do that research, it's hard. It's really hard. But you start to find, you're like, oh, we're lacking this type of warmth. We're lacking approachability. We're lacking, these qualities that I think gives me hope to continue to pursue music, even though bands have I've kind of done with my band journey, But,
yeah, well, bands don't do so well these days in general, do they? It's more.
They don't. They really don't, actually. Yeah, but even 10 years ago, the scene was completely different. Pre-COVID, there was still the illusion that you could be something with a band, that a label would pick you up. But now the labels don't have any money. So it's like...
Yeah, so, and so so there's all those problems, yet there's more music being made than ever, which is, so there's this huge desire for it. And it's not like there's no music around, there's a ton of it.
No, there's so much. I think maybe it's like what you said about having to go to a store and find something. Like I still have that experience, but I've had to make my music selection even more niche and personal, so that when I do find a record that I like in CD or vinyl, it resonates with me in such a sincere way. And like the journey to go there, like you remember that. You don't remember going on Spotify and finding something and you suggested, but you do remember going to some place, especially like because CD stores aren't that common. There's a few really good ones in Blackburn. There's like I can't remember what it's called. There's some amazing ones like Found Sound as well. And so it does have that real sentimental quality. And I think furthermore, like we need to give ourselves reasons to care and find out what those reasons are, why we care about something in the first place, because there's so much to choose from. Even it's the same with dating, and online dating, it's the same with people. It's like, we really need to start to understand who we are in order to understand the types of content that resonate with us in such a, wild time.
And so it's a very complex, full-on life being a kind of a younger person. It's like,
it's not super fun most of the time, I'll tell you that much.
It is or it isn't?
It isn't, no. It's fun when you
stressful, probably.
When you create your scene and when you play shows and stuff, but all the time in between, events. That's what I think is really difficult being a young person now. But I want to ask you one more thing. Thank you, by the way, for spending this hour with me. I read somewhere that you performed with Nick Cave.
Not with Nick Cave per se. I used to have an ensemble of music. I used to have 8 musicians. It was like my own ensemble, the David Chesworth ensemble, and this was during the late 90s and early noughties. I went into like a sort of a post-classical world. I sort of walked away from sort of pop music, and but we played sort of a strange sort of hybrid, sort of exotica kind of music, and we were invited by Nick by the Bad Seeds, I guess.
Yeah.
We played at the Forum, and we supported them. Yeah, and. We just played in the States, actually. So we were kind of, we were doing quite well, like back in the day when 8 people could tour.
Oh, man.
And then, and we had like cello, violin, trombone, marimbas, vibes, piano. And we played, we did the warm-up for Nick Cave, I think 2 nights. And we sold all our CDs, and people really loved it. And and I met Nick, and he was nice. But Essendon Airport used to play with the Boys Next Door back in the day. So, we'd often shared things. But then, as a little postscript to that, that was that experience. And then we were approached to go on tour with them across Europe, and we were we got funded from the Australia Council, part funded, and I just had to raise a bit more money. But it happened. What happened was then it was like the guy from the Saints. What's his name? This is gone now. It's other people. It was going to be us and the Bad Seeds, but then someone else came in, and then we'd be like, the warm up to the next person, and then someone else came in, and it was like, all right, that's it. So that everyone at the Australia Council, which is our funding body, they're called Creative Australia now. And back then, they were like so excited that this kind of classical type ensemble was going to tour with Nick Cave. So they gave us, a lot of the money, which I, didn't end up I gave back. But it was just unfortunate that the music industry did its thing where people just came in and kind of took a place above us, and that was the little dalliance with Nick Cave.
That's awesome. That's so cool that you guys go all the way back to his first band as well, because I feel like they would be such different worlds as well.
Well, they were just one thing to say, like when Essendon Airport was playing, we played at Clifton Hill, our first gigs, along with some other groups there, like Laughing Hands was one. Another one was called Ad Hoc that people won't know about really, and Tisk Tisk Tisk. And but Tisk 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 and us, we started to then play some pubs. We started some small pubs, and then we ended up playing these bigger places. Like there was a place called the Tiger Lounge, and there was another place, the Crystal Ballroom, which was kind of the big venue in St Kilda. And we'd often... but the thing is, at Clifton Hill, we were in our own kind of scene, which was quite different to the St Kilda scene. St Kilda bands were maybe more posturing and like the heroics of performance and, doing the drugs, alcohol, and just waste, they're portraying the wasted sort of thing. Whereas we were showed no emotion and just played. And we were not about expression. We were the opposite we didn't want to be expressive in all of those ways that we thought were cliche. And then there was other scenes, like there was the scene where this group Whirly World was in with another group, the Primitive Calculators, and that was they steered clear of us and they steered clear of the St Kilda scene. And then there was another group called the Little Bands as well, which were much more anarchistic and
of course the pub bands, right? Little band culture.
The little bands, they used to gather together and do a series of short performances. So it'd be one place, and then in a night they might have 20 bands on, and they'd all play for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Really very anarchistic. And so none of them really worked with each other, and we all stared each other down. And there was a rock press then that used to kind of really divide us up, and the rock press used to write about these different scenes, and so they kept all that stuff going. But when we started playing pubs, they started mixing it up a bit. And so yes, this is when we started to play with Boys Next Door, and we played with the Reels a lot and bands like that. But we also played with Midnight Oil and did warm-ups for them, that was much more of a mainstream audience, and they really hated us because we were sitting playing instruments and not being emotional, and so they would sometimes throw cans at us and cans of beer. But I enjoyed being. You could be provocative then. It actually meant something. You really did annoy people, and it was quite fun. Because a certain group of people really liked us, and then the other really hated us. So that's how come you end up playing with some of those people who were actually, aesthetically not in our camp.
But also on the subject of provocation, like it is a lot harder to know now what will provoke, from a punk audience standpoint. It's like, what do I do?
It's gestural now, like provocations. Yeah, if you provoke, you kind of play it provoking. If you're a punk band, punk is just like theatre now. I mean,
yeah, well, that's the thing. Post-punk as well. Post-punk probably even more so now as well.
Yeah. So music might not be a place for that kind of form of agitation or those like bands. That it's. Audiences are much more wise and well-read, and they know the histories a lot more. Today's audiences much more informed.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps if that is the angle that one wants to take. Sometimes I like to take that angle. Sometimes I want to play a nice, good show. But it definitely helps to read up on, I guess, history. As much as you can, just to understand why people are the way they are now and how we got here. Because God forbid you try to provoke somebody in a way that you perceive as a wholly original, but it's just, a carbon copy of something that was done better 20, 30, 40 years ago as well.
You just want to, provoke's probably a big word. You just want people to sort of like see what you do and make them like,
shock them, innovate them, give them some hope, give them something new, I guess. Refresh
something new when they go, I don't know if I like this, but then you go, I think I do, or now I get it. I would have walked away. I would have fast forwarded, but it's a bit live.
That's it. It's like being able to change people's perception of you, through some sort of an action, and that's a really rewarding feeling if done correctly. Like I feel like I've been doing that my whole life in general, but
you change people's perception of themselves as well.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Well. Thank you, David. This has been awesome. Is there anything you want to say to the listeners when this comes out? Any words of wisdom that you want to share?
So you might tell me, how's this coming out? Is this like just being played back or something? Or
so it'll be basically on Spotify released as like, there'll be a drawing of you. I'm probably going to put the Korg in there as well. Okay. And then later we get 30-second snippets of like the best part, and then they get animated in the same style. Spotify. So it's a Spotify 1 hour convo and a 30-second animated reel.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. Do I want to say something to people? Don't know.
Some people don't say anything,
I'm just very happy, actually. I'm so happy that people, stuck with my music and Essendon Airport's music. And because, after we performed it and we had like an audience, it was like a small subset. And but the fact that people kind of rediscovered it has been very sort of pleasing, because I think we put a lot into what we did, not wanting to repeat what people were doing at the time. So I'm always very grateful that I'm invited to by people like you and people who invite us to play at like Jerkfest or wherever. It's really nice that they still get something out of what we did and what we're still doing. Yeah.
No, I think what you do is like incredibly important, and I think that knowing, especially as a musician who's been like, I've been in the scene for 9 years, there's still so much I don't know, about the law and about just the culture, and a lot of us are so ignorant to it. And I think it's really important to be able to just take that in. And thank you for sharing so much cool shit with me today.
Well, that's great. No, you've asked. Yeah, I liked your questions. So that was excellent. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you. Yep. See you, Dan.
See ya.